be careful to read and learn whether the proposed alternative to the amendment that was tabled earlier today contains some of these provisions that were in the tabled amendment. If they don't, we will be filing, we have filed separate amendments which we will urge a up or down vote on. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President, would Senator yield for a question?
I would.
I think you were very wise in raising the question of the budget score. Our colleagues have been just blithely here asserting that this bill is going to pay for itself, and the CBO produced a report. And they've cited that report that says it will pay for itself. But that's not exactly what the report says, it seems to me. Here's the line in the report that CBO prepared. Net increases or decreases in the deficit resulting from changes in direct spending and revenues from this bill. How will it impact increasing the deficit or not? The on-budget deficit, even before this 30,000 new agents at billions of dollars in cost, netted out that it would add $14 billion to the on-budget debt. Okay? And so that's negative. It makes the debt more. But then there's the other line, the off-budget. Now, what is the off-budget? Well, the off-budget is Social Security, Medicare. This is the trust fund money that comes out of your payroll taxes, and so people pay payroll taxes. The average age of the legalized group is about 35, so most of them aren't going to be drawing Social Security right away. And they pay into this, and so the government gets some extra money. And they're counting that money as the money to show that the bill is paid for. But let me ask you one simple thing, Senator Cornyn. If the individuals who are now given legal status and immediately given a Social Security number, and immediately able to compete for any job in America, isn't the money that they'll be paying for Social Security and Medicare going to be used by them when they start drawing it? Aren't they going to be eligible now for Social Security and Medicare and won't this money be available for them? And isn't it double counting to say it's going to be available for their Social Security and then available to pay for all the spending in their bill?
Mr. President, I would say to the senator from Alabama that he reads it the same way I read it, and you can't do both. You can't use the money to pay for the bill and say you don't have to pay Social Security benefits when these very same people are going to expect someday that they will get those benefits. So what happens, as I understand it, and the distinguished ranking member of the Budget Committee can correct me if I'm wrong, but when we borrow money, in essence, from the Social Security Trust Fund, there's an IOU there that's going to have to be paid back. So it does appear to me there's double counting here, and I would just say the $14.2 billion on-budget deficit, that's before you add in the $30 billion of additional cost for 20,000 Border Patrol agents. And as I read page 48 of the CBO, they estimate that implementing the underlying bill would result in net discretionary costs of about $22 billion over the 2014 to 2023 period. So it sounds to me like the costs just keep mounting and there's double counting going on, and I just think we've got to get to the bottom of it, and given our rush, we need to slow down and understand the numbers, understand the financial impact, because that's not going to go away if we get it wrong.
I couldn't agree more, and the truth is that's how this country is going broke. There are two ways the accounting is done in our budget. One is a unified accounting process, and the other one shows these numbers in the fashion you and I just went forward. When you assume that the money that comes in for the newly legalized people, that Medicare and Social Security, when you assume that money is going to be available for their Social Security and Medicare, you can't then assume it's available to spend on something else. And it's a weakness in our system. It's been manipulated before, and we need to stop it. Thank you for raising that. And, of course, I remember well how many good years you spent on the Budget Committee, and you understand it very well. I thank the Chair and would yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Maine.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the United States has always been a country of refuge for the persecuted, a protector of life and individual freedoms. This is evident in the entire purpose of our nation's asylum program, under which foreign nationals who can show a credible fear of persecution in their home country may apply for and receive shelter here. But flaws in the asylum program leave it vulnerable and open to exploitation by those who mean us harm. I have, therefore, proposed 2 amendments to the Immigration Reform Bill, Amendment number 1391 and 1393, that are designed to lessen those flaws by giving asylum officers the tools that they need to dismiss frivolous claims and, more important, to ensure that derogatory information about applicants who may wish to harm us is reviewed during the application process. Mr. President, before I outline those amendments in detail, I would like to discuss the circumstances under which the suspects in the Boston Marathon terrorist attack came to be in the United States and how that terrible attack underscores the need for reform of our asylum process. According to media reports, the younger of the 2 Tsarnaev brothers came to the United States on a tourist visa in 2002 and was granted asylum on his father's petition shortly thereafter. As I mentioned before, asylum is supposed to be only available to those who can show a credible fear of persecution in their home country. Curiously, and notwithstanding his supposed fear of persecution back home, the father came to the United States with only 1 of his 4 children, leaving his wife and 3 other children behind in the land that he claimed to fear. I can't help but wonder whether the asylum officer who reviewed Mr. Tsarnaev's application was aware of that fact and to what extent this was considered in determining whether he met the burden of proving a credible fear of persecution by his country, since, after all, he had left his wife and 3 of his 4 children behind. Whatever the circumstances that caused Mr. Tsarnaev to seek asylum in 2002, after the Boston Marathon bombing, the international media caught up with him back in the land where he came from and now lives. Even more curious are the questions surrounding the grant of asylum to another Chechen immigrant, the individual who was shot dead while being questioned by the FBI agents and local law enforcement regarding his association with the Tsarnaevs and a 2011 triple homicide. After his death, reports indicated that this individual came to the United States in 2008 on a J-1 visa, the type of visa intended to promote cultural understanding that allows foreign students to work and study in our country, and that individual was granted asylum sometime later that year, in 2008. Now, the way in this particular case the visa operated is he was supposed to work for 4 months and then travel for 1 month in our country. But that is not what happened. Last month, I was contacted by the Council on International Educational Exchange, or CIEE, a J-1 visa sponsor organization located in my home state of Maine. CIEE told me that they had learned that this individual had come to the United States through their program, arriving in June of 2008. From the start, it appears that he had no intention of complying with CIEE's J-1 visa rules, and thus, on July 29th of 2008, CIEE withdrew its sponsorship of him because he failed to provide the required documentation with respect to his employment. That very day, CIEE, which is a very responsible organization, instructed him to make immediate plans to leave the country because they could not verify his employment, a key condition of the J-1 visa rules. CIEE then recorded this information in the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System, or SEVIS, the database used by the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of State to keep track of foreign visitors who travel to the United States on exchange visas. As I understand the facts, CIEE did everything right. It followed the rules. When this individual was clearly out of compliance with the conditions of his visa, it alerted DHS and the State Department that he was out of compliance. I have spoken to the president of CIEE, who told me that his organization was shocked to learn that this individual had been granted asylum and later given a green card. I find this very curious, Mr. President. How is it that a young man from Chechnya comes to the United States to participate in a cultural exchange program, immediately violates the conditions of that program, is told to leave our country, but then is able to be granted asylum? The fact that he was out of compliance with his visa was correctly recorded in the SEVIS database. Did the asylum officer who approved his application review that information? Did he check the database for derogatory information? Were any other databases, such as that maintained by the National Counterterrorism Center, consulted during the review of this asylum applicant? When and where was his asylum application reviewed and approved, and by whom? More than 2 weeks ago, I asked these fundamental questions of the Department of Homeland Security through staff and by letters that I personally sent to the Office of Legislative Affairs and to Secretary Janet Napolitano. Despite repeated phone calls and emails from my staff, the Department has still not provided me with the answers. What I have received instead are excuses, despite the fact that the subject of my inquiry is dead. and my questions are directly relevant to the asylum provisions in the immigration bill before us. Think about the failure of the DHS to provide the basic information I've requested. I've not asked about the individual's relationship to the terrorist attack in Boston, nor have I asked about his alleged connection to the triple homicide. The questions I've asked relate only to when he applied for and received asylum, whether the information related to his violation of his visa requirements was available and reviewed by the officer who granted him asylum, and I've asked who made the decision to grant him asylum. We know from media reports that his asylum application was acted on in 2008, 5 years ago. Is the department saying, through its silence, that information related to this individual's asylum application did in fact foreshadow the terrorist attack in Boston in April and his ultimate death last month? Why was his application approved? Why didn't the department deport him from our country when it was clear that he was no longer in compliance with his J-1 visa? Mr. President, I see that the Majority Leader has arrived on the Senate floor. If he would like me to cease my remarks, I would be happy to do so and to yield to him and then pick up where I left off.
Mr. President, I very much appreciate my friend from Maine with her usual courtesy. I would ask unanimous
Majority Leader is recognized.
Thank you. I would ask unanimous consent that the period for debate only be we extend it for 1 hour to 7:30. Time would be equally divided. And I'd also ask consent that my friend from Maine's statement not appear interrupted in the record.
Is there objection? Without objection. Senator from Maine.
Thank you, Mr. President. The basic question is, why wasn't this individual deported from our country when it was clear that he was no longer in compliance with the requirements of his J-1 visa? Instead, what happens is he's granted asylum and then later given a green card. I can only take the Department's refusal to provide answers as a tacit admission that a flawed asylum process allowed a dangerous man to get into our country on false pretenses and to stay here. That possibility, that likelihood, underscores the importance of the two amendments I'm offering. The first of my amendments, number 1391, would require that before an individual can be granted asylum, biographic and biometric information about that individual must be checked against the appropriate records and databases of the federal government, including those maintained by the National Counterterrorism Center. In addition, this amendment requires that the asylum officer find that the information in those records and databases supports the applicant's claim of asylum, or if derogatory information is uncovered, that the applicant is still able to meet the burden of proof required by law. The second of my two amendments, number 1393, would provide asylum officers with the authority to dismiss what are clearly frivolous claims without prejudice to the applicant, and requires asylum officers and immigration judges to obtain more detailed information from the State Department on the conditions in the country from which asylum is sought. In other words, what we've discovered is this is another example of one department not talking to another department. It's very difficult for an asylum officer to make a right decision if he or she lacks information about conditions in the originating country. This amendment also calls for increased staffing for the Fraud Detection and National Security Directorate at asylum offices funded through fees in this bill. Now, Mr. President, we can never know for sure whether the reforms that I'm calling for in these two amendments would have kept these dangerous individuals out of this country and perhaps even prevented the terrorist attack in Boston and the triple murder in another town in Massachusetts. But the way in which they use the asylum process clearly demonstrates that it can be abused and will be abused. My amendments will give asylum officers the tools that they need to help prevent that kind of fraudulent use of a very important and worthwhile system. And it will help to protect the American public from those who would do us harm. With these modest reforms, America's asylum process will continue to shelter those who legitimately fear persecution in their home countries, but it will be less easily taken advantage of by those who seek to harm us. I urge my colleagues to support these common sense amendments, and I yield the floor. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator from Louisiana.
Mr. President, I'm happy to report, actually, that there's been a lot of progress made in the last few hours on the package of amendments that are completely uncontested. And there's no objection on any side. And I really want to thank the members who have been attentive and supportive of trying to get back to a more normal way here of operating, which is simply you can argue about the big controversial issues. There are always going to be those on every bill we debate. But there will be some amendments that absolutely have no opposition because they are very well thought out ideas that do not generate any heartburn on either side, that actually people can reason and say, you know, that helps the bill, it perfects the bill, it does something that improves the bill. Now, we used to do that all the time around here, and we've really gotten away from it, and it's hurtful. It's not just hurtful to the individual members, it's hurtful to our constituents who would like their ideas brought up for consideration. Now, I know that, as I said earlier in the day, and I want to, with my friend here, Senator from Maine, before she leaves the floor, before the Senator from Maine leaves the floor, I want to make this perfectly clear. I am not holding up the debate on any controversial amendments. I'm not objecting to any controversial amendments. Anybody that wants to debate an amendment, whether it's 60 votes or 50 votes. That is the leadership's job, and they're managing this bill very well. I have no complaints or criticisms about it at all. But as they're managing these very controversial amendments that are, you know, part of any debate, what I'm simply saying is of the 228 amendments that have been filed, I'm sorry, let me get the exact number. If the staff would bring me the exact number, that might have been the committee amendments. Of the hundreds of amendments that have been filed, there are probably by my review, we've been spending a lot of time on this with Republican and Democratic staff, potentially about 25 or 30 amendments that have absolutely no objection. Now, the list has changed a little bit, and I'm not going to go over all of the details. I've put it in the record. There could potentially be 7 Democratic amendments, 5 Republican amendments, and 10 bipartisan amendments that have no opposition known. And all I'm asking is sometime between now and when the leadership managing this bill calls cloture, that we have these votes in block, by voice. There would be no reason to have any more debate on them. No one is objecting to them. So we could take them in block, by voice. It will improve the bill. Then people can vote against the bill. Many people already know they're going to vote against the bill. Some people are going to vote for the bill. That's the process. And I think it would be very healthy for the Senate to get back to this kind of negotiation. But for these amendments that are non-controversial, that simply have been worked on across the aisle in good faith to be held hostage until somebody can get a vote on an amendment that causes, one side or the other, lots of political difficulties, is just not right. So there are 350 amendments filed on this bill. 350. I'm only talking about 35 or less. All the other amendments have pros and cons. People are for them, people are against them, and I don't know how the leadership is going to decide on how we vote or disperse with those. But, I'm not managing the bill. Senator Leahy's doing a very good job of that, with Senator Grassley and Leader McConnell and Leader Reid. But what I'm saying is there are 35 approximately, maybe a little more, of amendments that have bipartisan support, that people have really worked on, people like myself who are not on the Judiciary Committee. The Senator had his hands full with the 17 members that he has on the committee. There were 228 amendments filed on the Judiciary Committee. Senator Grassley himself filed 34, and he had 13 that passed and 21 that failed. That's a lot of amendments. Some of us that are not on the Judiciary Committee, I've been very fortunate, at least I've had one of my 8, which the senator from Vermont helped with, adopted.
Would the senator yield on that point?
Yes, I would love to.
Mr. President, the senator has several excellent amendments which I support, agree to. We've given the other side over and over again a list of amendments that in normal circumstances would be agreed to in about 5 minutes by voice vote, including a number of the distinguished senator from Louisiana's amendment. I keep hoping we might do that. We had 140 amendments in the Judiciary Committee that were voted on. All but 1 or 2 were passed with bipartisan votes. Around 40 or more of them were Republican amendments. The others were all voted for by Republicans. And we demonstrated we're willing to do this on a bipartisan basis. I can assure the senator from Louisiana, who's a wonderful senator and dear friend, that I support these. I keep trying to get them accepted. I hope we will, after 2 weeks on this bill, and realizing what we did in the very extensive and open markup in a Judiciary Committee, that we could get to the point where we could start accepting a whole lot of amendments, both Democratic and Republican, that we all agree on, including those of the senator from Louisiana. I'm sorry to interrupt her, but she has worked so hard on this. She has gotten bipartisan support. She has talked to all of us, And at some point, she should be allowed to have her amendments. I yield the floor.
Well, thank you, the senator from Vermont, and I really appreciate his support. But actually, having started out wanting to get a vote on my amendments, and I still do, I'm now more focused on this principle of getting uncontested amendments adopted, because I'm not the only one in this boat. I have friends like Senator Begich, Senator Carper, Senator Hagan, Senator Hendrick, Senator Coons, Senator Kirk, Senator Coates, from both sides of the aisle, Senator Hatch, Senator, Shaheen. I could go on and on that are in the same boat that I am in. We fashioned amendments with bipartisan support. We have gone and done our due diligence with the members, the leaders of the committees of jurisdiction, which is what you're supposed to do, which is normal. We have gotten their blessing, if you will. We have published the details of our amendment. We have circulated the amendment. There is no opposition. So, as I said, the senator from Vermont, I want to be very clear. Yes, I would love to have, I've got 4 amendments on this list, but I want to make this crystal clear. I am not here just arguing for the 4 Landrieu amendments. I'm here arguing for all amendments by anybody, Republican or Democrat, that are non-controversial, uncontested, germane to this bill. They should go on the bill. We need to get back to legislating in the Senate. As I said, this is not a theater. It is a legislative body. And I came here to legislate. I've only been here, it'll be 18 years. It's a long time at the end of this term. There are members that have been here longer than I have. But it's been a while now, 2 or 3 years, since we just sort of stopped really legislating. We give speeches, we do headlines, we posture, we position. And look, that's always been a part of the Senate. I have no problem with it. What I do have a problem with is doing that and nothing else. That is what I have a serious problem about. And those of us that did not come here to be on the stage, we have had to sit on the sidelines and watch this theater for a long, long, long time. And I'm just saying that the people I represent are tired of it. Now, we should know that since the rating for Congress is now at 10%, the lowest level, I think, ever, or at least in the last 50 years. 10%. This could have something to do with it. Because contrary to popular opinion here on the floor, many people in America are very interested in this bill and are actually sending suggestions in through the emails, through radio, through telephone, through all sorts of communications saying, look, I've read the bill, you all should think about this could be improved, and oh my gosh, some of us actually take those suggestions and work with other members on the other side of the aisle, fashion them into amendments. The people we represent deserve, they deserve the respect. Now, if anyone thinks that my amendments are controversial, you cannot vote for them because they, upset the balance of power in the world or upset Western civilization, or then just come tell me. I'll work with you on it. I'll take the amendments off the list. I'll put my amendments on a list to be debated. But the days of us coming to the floor and absolutely not accepting bipartisan amendments so we can spend all of our time talking about partisan amendments that have no chance of passing are over with. Over. Because I have enough power, just like senators on the other side have enough power to push us the other way. I have enough power to push back, and I plan to use it. Those days are over. When we come to the floor, you can have all of your controversial amendments. We can set aside as many hours of the day to vote on controversial amendments. Equal number on both sides or none. But the uncontroversial amendments, the ones that members actually do the work of the Senate, research, writing, talking, debating privately and coming up with good ideas, no longer are those going to be swept under the rug. It is not respectful to our constituents, it dishonors the Senate, and it causes the public to have, doubts, serious doubts, as to whether anybody around here is actually working in a bipartisan way to improve the bill. Now, these are minor amendments. Nothing in here undermines, none of these amendments undermine the bargain, tough negotiations by Republicans and Democrats on this bill, and I want to give a lot of respect to the Gang of Eight. They've taken on the tough issues, tough, big ones, very controversial. That's not these. These are amendments that would help, like parents who are trying to adopt children. Now, if I have to wait for a bill to come to the floor to help these parents, they may be waiting 10 years. They are American citizens. They have a right for senators to represent their interests, and I intend to do it. There are amendments here that would make sure that children with mental illness or that are mentally disabled, this is not my amendment, but it's a good one, make sure they have a lawyer. Now, why can't we do that? Because we're so angry with each other that we won't help a child? That is cruel, and it is not correct. So I'm going to end here. There are other members that want to speak. I'm hoping that we can, I have no idea when the cloture vote will be. I'm not sure. But if these amendments, these non-controversial amendments, are not adopted by voice vote or by roll call vote in block or separately before cloture, all of them will fall away, which means we will not be able to consider any of them, because after cloture, they are no longer germane because we cannot get them pending. Okay? So this is the problem. And I thank my colleagues for being, understanding of this, and I actually think that it might help us move forward. So I yield the floor, and we'll be back when the cloture motion is propounded.
The senator from Iowa.
I want to make a few points in response to the senator from Louisiana who's been pushing to get a number of so-called non-controversial amendments adopted. There has been a number of misrepresentations. A major incorrect point that was made is that our side responded with only a list of controversial amendments. The fact is that we sent over for consideration by the other side a number of amendments on our list, but we did not hear that we could just get a vote on but we did ask, in addition to sending back a list of non-controversial amendments, we did ask that we could just have a vote on a number of our amendments. And so talk about breakdowns. We can't even get a vote on our amendments. Now, in regard to some of the amendments that the senator from Louisiana has suggested, they're not as easy as it appears. Some are badly drafted. So we tried to fix them and send it back. We haven't heard yet. And the list that we sent over doesn't mean that we won't agree to more amendments later, but we've got to work through these and fix those that are messed up, frankly. But the latest problem is that the Democrats want to pick which Republican amendments we can vote on. I have, for instance, an anti-gang amendment that the Democrats don't want to vote on. Their bill allows gang members to become citizens. We should get votes on our amendments in addition to this whole process of approving a list of non-controversial amendments that can be adopted in block. I yield the floor.
May I respond?
Senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I've said many times, I have the deepest respect for the senator from Iowa. He and I hardly ever disagree, so this is quite unusual because we co-sponsor so many pieces of legislation together for foster kids, for adoption, and his work is just legendary. But I do want to say this. I have tried to be extremely constructive here. And again, this isn't about our list or their list. I'm not even in charge of our list or their list. I literally am not a floor manager of this bill. I'm not even a member of the committee. So I don't even have access to our list or their list. I don't want it. I do not want to review the 200 amendments that are pro-gay, anti-gay, pro-fence, anti-fence. I'm not interested. I am interested, but it's not in my lane. I have issues that I've got to focus on as chair of the Homeland Security. I'm not a Gang of Eight member. I'm not on the Judiciary Committee, but I am a senator. And I came here to legislate. And there are amendments. I'm not sure this list is perfect, but I promise you, out of 350 amendments filed, just by nature of averages, at least 10% of them have got to be uncontroversial. I mean, not every amendment that's filed is going to arouse suspicion or concern or violate any principles that we hold. Just by nature, you're going to have 10% or 15 or 20% of all amendments that actually, with a little bit of work, should be adopted. And what Senator Leahy said is absolutely correct. We used to do that when we trusted each other, when we respected our constituents. And I intend to push this body back to that place. Now, I may be unsuccessful because I'm only one senator, but senators have a lot of power, if you haven't noticed. We've been held up for weeks over one senator because they didn't get everything they wanted every day. Again, I want to say to my colleagues, I am not fighting for Landrieu amendments. I'm fighting for a principle and a process that is vital to the functioning of this body. And I am going to continue to fight and hope that we get a breakthrough. So please, the other side, do not send me your list or the Democratic list. I'm not interested. I'm interested in a list of amendments that I believe, based on conversations with senators, are not controversial and would improve the bill. We were sent here to do that. I intend to do it, and I yield the floor.
Short time.
Mr. President.
Senator from Arizona.
I take the floor today to speak in support of the Hoeven-Corker amendment that will soon be filed. Let me just say that the goal of the so-called Gang of Eight has always been to bring forward from Congress a solution to our broken immigration system. We introduced our bill knowing full well that it would be a starting point for this legislative process. We had, under Senator Leahy and Senator Grassley's purview, a great markup in the Judiciary Committee. It went on for days, more than 300 amendments filed, more than 100 adopted. We've had a full-throated debate in this chamber already on this bill. And out of this vetting and this debate that we've had several consistent messages on things that need to be improved in the legislation. And what we're doing right now, I think, is going a long way to deal with these concerns. We've heard that we've allowed too much discretion to write the strategy for the border security plan. We've given too much to the Department of Homeland Security that will simply spend the billions of dollars that will be appropriated eventually. This amendment includes a detailed list of technologies that will have to be put in place by the department. We will set a minimum floor of what they have to do, and then they can go beyond that. The underlying legislation, we require that a strategy is deployed in the underlying legislation, that an entry-exit system for all airports and seaports be in place, and that E-Verify be up and running for all businesses in the United States before anyone is granted legal permanent residency. There are persistent concerns that still won't be sufficient to ensure a secure border, that we need more incentive there. This amendment filed by Senators Hoeven and Corker will require 700 miles of fence be completed and that we have double the number of border agents that we currently have. These things have to be done before anybody in provisional status adjusts to get a green card. This is important. This amendment dramatically increases the trigger that will have to be met in order for anyone, as I said, who is in provisional status to adjust to get a green card. This is a product of the ongoing scrutiny that this bill has received, the scrutiny that it deserves. We said from the very beginning that this bill deserves debate, due process, through committee and on the floor in this chamber. And it is receiving that today, and it is a better bill for it. It is going to be considerably improved, particularly after the Hoeven-Corker amendment is introduced and hopefully adopted. I hope that in the coming days we'll also have as much scrutiny on the positive aspects of this bill. State and local governments currently deal with a sizable undocumented population, all of them, particularly in Arizona. Businesses are looking for a legal workforce that they simply don't have access to right now. Right now, the best and the brightest come here, we educate them in our universities, and then we send them home to compete against us because we won't allow them to stay on a visa. The U.S. economy overall could use the boost that will come if we can pass meaningful immigration reform. Again, I support this amendment. I commend my colleagues from Tennessee and North Dakota and all those who are working in the Gang of Eight and elsewhere. There are some who say that many people are trying to kill this bill and bring poison pill amendments. For the most part, what I've seen are people who want to improve this legislation, to make it better, to deal this problem in a way that will solve it for good, so we don't have to return to this a couple of years from now. Again, I appreciate my colleagues for offering the amendment. I look forward to discussing it either this weekend or next week. I yield the floor.
President, I suggest you answer.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
President.
Senator from Vermont.
President, I'd ask the consent to call a quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, you know, as several senators have mentioned, this legislation has been pending on the Senate floor since the beginning of last week. Now we're near the end of this week. If everybody here had been in favor of at least getting a vote one way or the other on immigration bill, we would have started disposing of amendments during the first week the bill was on the Senate floor. Unfortunately, there are some who don't want any bill, no matter what we write. They will have every objection to every amendment. They will have every delaying tactic possible, but they're a tiny minority. What we ought to do is show the majority, Republicans and Democrats, vote for or against the bill. The people who object to it, they objected to proceeding to comprehensive immigration reform. That cost us several days. And then when we proceeded, we got 84 senators voted in favor of proceeding. It should tell the American people something. This week, I've been working closely with the majority leader, with the ranking member, Senator Grassley, and others to make progress. But every time we try to bring matters up and get them passed, we face objection. So far, we have considered amendments, but there's 250 amendments that have been filed. In a week and a half, we've gotten to 11. 11. That's not progress. That's not. No wonder the American people wonder what's going on. If we continue on this rate, we're going to be singing Christmas carols as we come to the end of this legislation, and we will have done nothing else. Now, some would like that. They'd like to have this take up all the time. We don't do judges. We don't do budget. I mean, we said the other side objects even to going to a conference which had more Republicans on it than Democrats for a conference on the budget. What is this? If people to government at all, in any form, democratic government, then let them set up an ulterior government. But this is ridiculous. We have a system. The people claim we're for the Constitution. Let the Constitution work. Let people vote up or down. This is important. It's long overdue legislation to repair our immigration system. Let's vote on it. Now, Senator Landrieu came to the floor last night. She came again today to talk about the delays we've had. I agree with her. Senators on both sides of the aisle have worked hard on the amendments that filed this legislation. Senators who are not on the Judiciary Committee have been waiting for their opportunity to contribute to this bill. And many of their amendments are bipartisan. They ought to be heard. Many of the amendments are non-controversial. So they have widespread support. But we know some amendments are controversial, but the amendments that have been proposed to me as non-controversial are intended to improve and strengthen the legislation. In the past, we'd take them up over an hour's time and vote them all through. Except we have some who give great speeches about worrying about people coming to this country, but they're determined not to let anybody into this country. Mr. President, you and I and virtually everybody in this body would not be here if these had been the rules when our parents or our grandparents or our great-grandparents came to this country. Let's vote. Let me say what the Judiciary Committee did. We considered a total of 212 amendments over an extensive markup that involved more than 35 hours of debate. And we made sure it was in the public. We streamed it live. People all over the nation watched it. More than half of the amendments considered were offered by the Republican members of the committee. I went back and forth. One Democrat, one Republican, one Democrat, one Republican. We adopted over 135 amendments to this legislation. 132 of them had Republican and Democratic votes. They're bipartisan. Now, we set a gold standard. This body should do the same thing that the 18 of us did. I filed a manager's amendment that combines a number of the non-controversial amendments that have been offered to this legislation. I hope that the Republicans and Senator Grassley, the Judiciary Committee's ranking member, would join with me in disposing of these non-controversial amendments. We did it in the committee. Incidentally, the bill, when it finally came out of committee, was by a bipartisan vote. Look at the amendments included, the manager's amendment, non-controversial, widespread support, filed by senators on both sides over the last 2 weeks. Many have been discussed at length on the floor. We improve oversight of certain immigration programs. Non-controversial technical amendments have been agreed to by the ranking member and by the authors of the bill. Amendment from the chair and ranking member of the Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs, Senators Carper and Coburn, to establish an Office of Statistics within the Department of Homeland Security. Amendment by Senator Cochran. Senator Landrieu, who is the chairwoman of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Homeland Security, requires increased reporting on the EB-5 program. Amendment by Senator Heller requiring DHS to report to Congress about implementation of the biometric exit program that was added to the bill in committee by Senator Hatch. Bipartisan amendments offered by Senators Kirk and Coons to support the naturalization process for active duty members in the armed forces who receive military awards. Who could possibly disagree with that? Trio of amendments championed by Senators Coate, Landrieu, and Klobuchar to ease the process for international adoptions. An amendment by Senator Hagan to reauthorize the Bulletproof Vest program. Incidentally, a program begun as a bipartisan program. An amendment by Senator Nelson to provide additional resources for maritime security. Chairman Carper, amendment that requires DHS to submit a strategy to prevent unauthorized immigration transiting through Mexico. Now, these are sensible, non-controversial amendments. If we had a roll call vote on these, they get 90 or 95 votes. They'd probably get all 100 of us. Well, let's vote on them. Let's adopt them. Let's show the American people we actually care about having immigration reform. You know, the senator from Louisiana and others are right. We ought to take up those amendments. We share common ground. We so often get bogged down by divisive amendments. Why not join together and pass those that we agree on, Republicans and Democrats? If we do that, we might actually fix our immigration reform, our immigration system. The one thing everybody agrees on, the system does not work today. We're trying to fix it. At least bring up and vote on and pass those provisions that both Republicans and Democrats support. More importantly, the American people support and get it passed. I suggest you answer the quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Introducing Senate Bill 744, the Comprehensive Immigration Reform legislation that this Senate body is carefully considering and debating. That amendment is the Hoeven-Corker Border Security Amendment. It's being finalized, and I plan to introduce it this afternoon along with the senator from the great state of Tennessee, Senator Bob Corker, who is here with me, and I want to thank him for the tremendous work that he's done on this legislation. He's been absolutely inspirational to work with, a great leader, and somebody who is really working to do immigration reform the right way, to get a bipartisan solution that truly addresses the challenges that we face with immigration reform and to get it done the right way. In addition to Senator Corker and myself, other sponsors include Senator John McCain, Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator Marco Rubio, Senator Jeff Flake, Senator Kelly Ayotte, Senator Dean Heller, and others that are joining us on this legislation. I believe a number of them will be down here to provide their comments as well. I believe that the first order of business for immigration reform is to secure the border. I'll repeat that. I believe that the first order of business for immigration reform is to secure the border. Americans want immigration reform. Of that, there is no doubt. But they want us to get it right. And that means first and foremost securing the border. In 1986, President Reagan and the Congress granted legalized status to between 3 and 4 million illegal immigrants. The intent was to once and for all resolve the illegal immigration problem. But obviously it didn't. Here we are today with more than 11 million illegal immigrants in this country. And here we are today with a border that has still not been secured. Ironically, well, illegal immigrants continue to come into our country because we've not secured the border. At the same time, our immigration laws do not meet the needs of our modern-day workforce for STEM-trained workers and other specialty and high-demand areas. In fact, one of the strengths of the underlying bill, the underlying legislation drafted by the Gang of Eight on a bipartisan basis, along with amendments that have already been added in committee, one of the strengths is that it includes provisions that will help us with our workforce needs. These provisions were adopted from legislation that myself and other senators sponsored, like legislation led by the esteemed senator from Texas, Senator John Cornyn, which would allow an increased number of college graduates, post-college degreed individuals, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math-trained individuals, and other highly skilled, highly trained people who could stay in this country, people we need to help grow our economy and to help create jobs. We also want people who can bring capital and job-creating opportunities to come to our country. And I believe the underlying bill has captured these concepts. The immigration innovation legislation that I was proud to co-sponsor with Senators Hatch and Klobuchar, Coons, and others is included in this bill. But we're not done. We're not done. We must do more to secure the border in this legislation. And that's exactly what we're offering here today. It is a very straightforward way to secure our border and to do so before allowing a pathway to legal permanent residency for those who came here illegally. Furthermore, it will ensure that we do not repeat the error we made before. Failure to secure our border while at the same time fixing our immigration laws. It builds on what's already in the underlying bill, and it provides objective, verifiable standards and metrics to do so. Our legislation will provide significantly more resources to secure the border, more manpower, more fencing, more technology. And those resources must be fully deployed and operational before green card status is allowed. The legislation provides 5 specific conditions which must be met before anyone in RPI status, registered provisional immigrant status, can be adjusted or transitioned to LPR, lawful permanent resident status, green cards. These conditions are, first, we are including a comprehensive southern border security plan right in the legislation. This is a $3.2 billion high-tech plan. The plan is detailed, border sector by border sector, and it includes combinations of conventional security infrastructure like observation towers, fixed and mobile camera systems, helicopters, planes, and other physical surveillance equipment to secure the border. The plan also includes high-tech tools like mobile surveillance systems, seismic imaging, infrared ground sensors, and unmanned aerial systems equipped with infrared radar cameras, Vader radar, and long-range thermal imaging cameras. The Secretary of Homeland Security, together with the Secretary of Defense and the Comptroller General of the U.S., the GAO, must certify to the Congress that this comprehensive southern border security strategy is deployed and operational. That means in place and operating other than routine maintenance. That's the first requirement before the adjustment to LPR status. Second, DHS must deploy and maintain 20,000 additional Border Patrol agents on the southern border. That's in addition to the number of Border Patrol agents on the border now, which is right about 20,000 now. So we'll double the number of armed Border Patrol agents to detect and turn back those individuals who would try to cross our border illegally. Third, DHS must build 700 miles of fencing. That's double the amount required in the underlying bill, which calls for 350 miles of fencing. 700 miles of fencing, that compares to about 40